The Jonathan Kuminga situation continues to drag on as we kind of get into the dead portion of the offseason, where the only real newsworthy NBA news right now is with restricted free agents. Jonathan Kuminga, Josh Giddey, Cam Thomas, Quentin Grimes. But the Jonathan Kuminga situation seems the most interesting because Jonathan Kuminga seems like the player that is most likely to actually change teams. Jonathan Kuminga seems like the player that is most disgruntled with his current situation, although Cam Thomas is very disgruntled as well with the Nets' offer. It feels like Kuminga is the most likely to move teams because the Warriors don't seem to value him very highly, and he seems completely done with the Warriors. And maybe this all ends in Jonathan Kuminga just eventually going back to the Warriors on a one-year qualifying offer and then leaving next offseason. That is very possible. But whatever happens, it sure feels right now like Jonathan Kuminga will not be a Warrior long term. There's been plenty of reports around this whole Jonathan Kuminga situation about what teams are interested, what teams are offering, both in terms of salary to Jonathan Kuminga and also trade packages in a sign and trade to the Warriors. But it feels like we finally got some concrete news, or at least concrete rumors in what Sam Amick has been reporting that holds some weight. We got reports that the Warriors have been offering a 2-year deal with the second year being a team option. So they are obviously not valuing him very highly if they aren't willing to guarantee him money past the first year. The Suns have apparently come in with a pretty sizable offer. That includes 4 years. But what the Kings offer reportedly is 3 years for $63 million total. And so before we kind of get into the trade packages that the Kings would have to send in a sign and trade to the Warriors, let's just talk about the value of 3 years for $63 million. Coming into this whole situation, I was thinking that the Kings, if they wanted to really get Jonathan Kuminga and sign Jonathan Kuminga, I thought they would have to more go towards the $25 million a year mark for 4 years, which was a little scary to me because I don't think that Jonathan Kuminga is worth 4 years, $25 million. $25 million average annual value for a player that hasn't really proven themselves even as a reliable starter in the NBA just seems a little scary. But it was something that I was considering just because the Kings seem like they're heading towards a rebuild. And so maybe that money wouldn't really matter. Maybe it wouldn't matter if you're overpaying a guy, if it's taking a risk on a guy with potential, especially if the trade package going back towards the Warriors wasn't too expensive. But the idea that the Kings would give 4 years to $25 million a year was still a scary thought for an unproven player. Sure, maybe he could grow into that type of value, but right now he is not worth that type of value in my mind. And so getting reports that the Kings are offering one less year, so only 3 years, and offering an average annual value of $21 million a year, that feels a lot better from the Kings side of things. And I feel like the Kings in this whole ordeal have been valuing Jonathan Kuminga in a very fair way, in a way that I feel like I value Jonathan Kuminga. I feel like I value him in a similar way as to what the Kings front office is currently valuing him at. Where Jonathan Kuminga is a player that the Kings front office wants and that can contribute, but they aren't viewing him as some surefire star that is going to take the Kings to the next level, and the Kings need to get Jonathan Kuminga any way they can. Because if they thought that Jonathan Kuminga was for sure going to be a star and they needed him no matter what, then they probably would have offered him the 4 years, and they would have offered him more money, and they would have offered Keegan Murray or Keon Ellis in a sign and trade to the Warriors. But that's not the case. The Kings are only offering the 3 years. The Kings are only offering the $21 million a year. And the Kings are not offering Keegan Murray and Keon Ellis in a trade. They aren't willing to give up players that they maybe see as the future of the Kings, or at least players that they highly value, for a guy like Jonathan Kuminga. Because I think the Kings front office see Keegan and Keon as players that can contribute to winning teams in the future, or they're just going to be valuable trade chips in the future if it comes to that. And so the Kings aren't valuing Jonathan Kuminga as this star level player. I think what they're valuing him at is a potential starter, someone who has potential, who was drafted in 2021 at the 7th overall pick, and who has shown flashes, but needs a change of scenery, needs kind of a redraft scenario where the Kings would trade for him and sign him, and he would become one of the youngest players on the Kings, despite being in the league for some time now. And so that absolutely has value. And the Kings are kind of valuing him as a lottery pick, or maybe a late lottery pick. At the end of the day, he is a restricted free agent. He has been in the league for some time, and he hasn't proven to be a reliable starter yet in the league. So the Kings are kind of just valuing him as another draft pick at his age, as kind of a late lottery, maybe mid lottery type of player. So when you look at what the Kings would give up in a sign and trade package for Jonathan Kuminga, there have been reports of Devin Carter and Dario Saric and a protected first round pick. And then there's a report of Malik Monk and a protected first round pick. And those are deals that seemingly have been on the table for quite some time now. Maybe there have been some slight adjustments to them, but generally it's always been kind of Devin Carter or Malik Monk plus some draft capital. But apparently the Warriors are just not interested in those type of deals. They aren't interested in Malik Monk because they would probably have to move another player if they were to trade for Malik Monk. Maybe a Buddy Hield or a Moses Moody would have to go out to bring in a guy like Malik Monk salary-wise. But then again, if the Warriors want to bring in Jonathan Kuminga and give Jonathan Kuminga around the same amount of money that Malik Monk would be making, then they'd be in the same type of situation there. So the Warriors could go the cheaper route and trade for Devin Carter and a guy like Dario Saric and take a chance on a late lottery guy in Devin Carter, just like the Kings are taking a chance on Jonathan Kuminga. Although Devin Carter has spent a lot less time in the league and of course had his injury last season, but maybe, a change of scenery and Devin Carter could contribute to a Warriors team possibly. And then looking at the first round pick, the protected first round pick, apparently it's a 2030 lottery protected pick that if it didn't convey, then it would become the 2031 worst swap between the Spurs and the Kings. So the least valuable of the Kings and Spurs picks would go to the Warriors in 2031. So again, the Kings are willing to give up on a late lottery pick in Devin Carter, or they're willing to, give up a guy like Malik Monk, who maybe they kind of want to get off his contract anyways, but who still, they probably value as a player, but maybe just not as a player for the future. Plus, they're willing to give, a mid to late first round pickup. And so for me, adding that up, it feels like the Kings are kind of valuing Jonathan Kuminga as a mid-lottery player. And so it's as if the Kings are drafting a player in the middle of the lottery that is Jonathan Kuminga in this situation. But these offers just don't seem to be interesting the Warriors, which is like, fair enough. If they don't value Malik Monk, if they don't want to have to make other roster adjustments to take in Malik Monk's money, if they don't value Devin Carter, if they don't value that pick, fair enough. They can try to keep Jonathan Kuminga, whether that's long-term, whether that's a qualifying offer, whether it's a shorter deal, and they try to trade him at the deadline, whatever that is, or try to go find a better deal somewhere else. That's fair enough. But the thing is, I don't think that they're going to get a better offer. I think the Kings offers, both of them, are some of the best offers that the Warriors are probably going to get for a guy like Jonathan Kuminga. Because, Kuminga has some value, but at the end of the day, he's a restricted free agent that doesn't want to be there, and who hasn't proven a ton in the NBA. The Warriors apparently are trying to get an unprotected first round pick from the Kings, which I just don't see happening. They're also trying to get Keegan Murray or Keon Ellis. I don't see that happening, right? I think the Kings are probably set with their offer. You don't give up an unprotected pick when the Kings are already in an uncertain situation. You have no idea where that pick could be. If it's a 2030 pick or whatever year that pick is, you don't give up an unprotected pick. You shouldn't give up Keegan Murray or Keon Ellis because they are winning players at this point. And so the Kings have given their best offer, and it's just, will the Warriors accept it or not? I don't think the Kings should adjust their offer at all. I think the offers that the Kings have come with are fair. I think both in terms of the trade package and in terms of the contract to Jonathan Kuminga. I think all of it is fair. And so now it's up to the Warriors to try to work something else out. And if they just have Jonathan Kuminga come back to the team on a qualifying offer for 1 year, now the Kings are positioned to go after Jonathan Kuminga in unrestricted free agency the following year. So I think the Kings are playing this in the best possible way, where they're in a good position and they don't have to raise their offer. And Jonathan Kuminga is not the type of player that you need to drop everything and absolutely get. He's a solid player who could be good value, but the offers are fair. And if you can get him in unrestricted free agency next year, I mean, even better. Because the Kings just value him as a potential starter and maybe not that star level player. I mean, that's what 3 years, $21 million a year says to me. That's what the trade packages say to me. And that's exactly how I value him at this point. I value him as someone who if he comes in, he's in a position where there's really no other young players on the Kings right now that have a bunch of star potential. And so that's probably why Kuminga wants to come to Sacramento, is because he wants to prove himself. He thinks he's going to be a star. He wants an opportunity to prove himself. I think Sacramento gives him the opportunity to do that. And I think it could be a great situation because either he turns into a star, or guess what? He doesn't. And then he sees that. And hopefully then he accepts a lesser role, and hopefully he does become, a starter level player and can contribute to winning in maybe a different way than he envisions right now. But you give him the opportunity to spread his wings, see how far he can fly. And, if he doesn't become that star, he can just become a solid contributor for your team, hopefully. And so looking at the fit of him on this current Kings team, it's a little interesting to look at the fit, because what are you really looking at? Are you looking at how he fits on the team right now? Or are you looking at the future? I think it makes more sense to look at the future because Jonathan Kuminga would be a player for the long term. And so in that sense, you're really only looking at the fit with guys like Keegan Murray and Keon Ellis, who obviously you view as the future if you're not willing to give them up in a trade. Maybe a guy like Nick Clifford as well. Maybe Domantas Sabonis, maybe. With Keegan Murray and Keon Ellis and those type of guys, they can really fit with anyone. And I think Jonathan Kuminga, as a guy who wants to get his shots up and wants to be a top scorer, I think he fits super well with Keegan and Keon, who are just both great role players that can play both ways and fit wherever they need to. When you're more looking at the fit right now, if you're looking at the fit next season, Jonathan Kuminga comes in, he's probably replacing DeMar DeRozan. So you probably don't need to look at that fit because those two don't fit together at all, right? It would probably be Jonathan Kuminga replacing DeMar DeRozan in the starting lineup, because the Kings have reportedly met with Jonathan Kuminga and apparently offered him a starting spot again, which is why Jonathan Kuminga wants to come to Sacramento. And so that starting spot probably is DeMar's spot, and DeMar would probably be moved if Kuminga was brought in. So looking at the fit of a starting lineup of Dennis Schroeder, Zach LaVine, Keegan Murray, Jonathan Kuminga, and Domantas Sabonis, I mean, it's not the greatest team in the world, but it does fit. It works. Jonathan Kuminga coming in, replacing DeMar DeRozan, adding that athleticism on the wing, replacing DeMar DeRozan as a scorer. It would be nice to add some athleticism on the defensive end. He would need to improve as an off-ball defender, but it would be really nice to have someone with his athleticism on the wing to guard on ball. That's something the Kings have needed. He's not exactly the big four that maybe the Kings need, but he would still help out with his athleticism on the wing. On the offensive side of things, I think he would fit in a fast tempo system alongside Domantas Sabonis and Zach LaVine. I think that works really well. He would fit as a cutter off of Domantas Sabonis for sure. And so not that it really matters, but I think there is a fit there. There's a spot where he can slot into, again, not that it matters because you're more making this move for the long term. And you would hope to, get the ball in his hands and really see him develop. If you were to acquire Jonathan Kuminga, you would want to see what you have. So you would have to commit to making sure that he's a focal point of any offensive system that you are running. And I think this is always why getting a guy like Dennis Schroeder was solid for the Kings. Again, you don't have to like that move, but getting a vet point guard. So if you do get a guy like Jonathan Kuminga, so Jonathan Kuminga doesn't have to be like a ball handler and a guy like Schroeder can set him up and Sabonis can set him up, I think that works well. But just looking at, the rumors and reporting, we don't know exactly what's going on, but looking at what has been reported, I like how the Kings are handling this situation so far. They seem like they're sticking to their guns. Right, they've made their offer. Maybe the offer has fluctuated a little bit. Maybe they've increased it a little bit from the start. I have no idea. But it seems like what they're offering is fair. And if it happens, it happens. It doesn't seem like they're going to make some crazy overpay for Jonathan Kuminga. And I feel like they're valuing him exactly right. Because I don't know if you're going to get a star player out of Jonathan Kuminga, but I think he can come in and be a potential starter for the future, especially if the Kings are willing to give him that opportunity to develop. That's pretty much it on the Jonathan Kuminga situation. There's been so much reporting in the past month about this situation. I could have made a video twice a week on this whole situation, but all it would have been is looking at regurgitated reporting, the same thing over and over. So I wanted to wait a little bit until we had some kind of concrete rumors. The only other Kings news that's really happening right now is the Kings filled their last two-way spot, and it wasn't with Isaiah Crawford. Isaiah Crawford went to Houston in a two-way spot there. The Kings filled their last two-way spot with Daeqwon Plowden, who is almost 27 years old, so he's getting up there as a two-way guy. He played really well for the Kings in Summer League, shot the ball well, was a solid defender, was getting after it on the defensive end, which is what you love to see, using his length, size, athleticism there. So a solid 3-and-D guy in Summer League. When he got on the ball offensively, he wasn't great. He didn't shoot all that well in the G League last season, but his history, I wouldn't look too much into that. He shot 53% in 6 games from 3 with the Hawks last season on about 3 attempts per game. So, I think he'll bounce back from a poor shooting G League season last year. So I do like Daeqwon Plowden. I like what he was doing in Summer League. I like what he brings as a confident three-point shooter and as a solid defender. But it is interesting to give up on a guy like Isaiah Crawford. I mean, I know he sealed his fate in Summer League when he did not play well at all, when he didn't make an impact and he was invisible in many games. He just couldn't find a way to make an impact on the offensive end. But he's 3 years younger, and he's a very good defender, and he's a solid three-point shooter. So for me, I would have kept Isaiah Crawford, and I would have just, tried to develop him. But he did play pretty poorly in Summer League, and Plowden clearly outplayed him there. So obviously I can see where the Kings are coming from. I said before Summer League that Isaiah Crawford was my player to watch and that his performance in Summer League was going to determine a lot for him, and it did. Not in the way that we wanted it to. And so that's unfortunate. But anyways, that is it for this episode of the Roll Report. I will be back whenever there's more Kings news. I also got other NBA content on the way, so keep an eye out for that. And I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.